How to make better freestanding lace. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Amber Stevens and I work with embroiderydesigns.com. We have an exciting event planned for you packed with tutorials and special flash sales. Stay tuned and I'll tell you more about that. Today you're going to learn the best supplies and techniques to make FSL like a pro. Our host today is Lindee G. She is the godmother of embroidery, a master digitizer, author, and instructor with decades of experience. She's the founder of the design collection Cactus Punch and the instructional website lindeegembroidery.com. Lindee G has been featured on numerous PBS sewing shows and the covers of industry embroidery magazines and has published 4 books on embroidery, so we're pretty sure you're in good hands. If you enjoy her demonstration today, join us for future events to see more great tutorials like this. During the event, Lindee G will demonstrate the best way to stitch out 3 FSL designs, including what supplies she used and tips for troubleshooting. We've included the links to the stabilizer, thread, and designs used in today's event below this video. As our attendee, only you have access to our exclusive flash sale. That includes a free design pack with any purchase greater than $0. Select FSL packs, originally around $35 to $70, are now $14.99. Free shipping on select FSL-friendly stabilizers, plus free shipping on all Madeira thread using code Lindee. Remember to stick around after the event for a Q&A session with Lindee G. Thank you for attending, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Have you ever wondered if it's easy to create freestanding lace with your embroidery machine? Have you ever tried it? Well, it is pretty easy if you know a few tricks. For instance, your machine has to be set up and working properly. You need to have the right stabilizers, threads, and needles, and you need to have the right kind of design. You also need to have good technique, and that's what we're going to cover today in this video. So let's get started. So let's talk about some of these designs I have around here. Some of these are featured designs with embroiderydesigns.com. You'll find them down below. You'll find products and threads that all go along with this class down there. So you can shop anytime you want to. Now this design is a freestanding lace design. It's a little snowflake. It looks better in the dark because I have this battery operated candle, because I couldn't hold my hand over this if it was a real flame. And we have a Tealight Angel, and she's another little design that could fit over a battery operated tea light. She's multicolored. Now I've done her 4 different ways. I've done her for freestanding lace as single color and multicolor, and they do have to be digitized differently. I've also done her to work with organza. Now some of us can't get good enough tensions on our machine to sew lace, it just falls apart. So when you have a design that's done for organza, you can have the same kind of look with a little bit of extra sparkle, because I like that twinkle nylon organza, and it holds together better. It's also lower stitch count. So let's look at a couple of these other designs. Here's a little flower design. Can we get the cameraman to zoom in on this? So with this little red, white, and blue flower, I have 3 pieces, and I've just sewn each piece in a different color, and then I've glued them together. I've kind of shaped them as they dried. Some of these other ones that are in color, I've used a matching bobbin. I did use a matching bobbin on the flower too. This one looks good on both sides. So does the metallic gold one. And I did not use metallic gold in the bobbin, I can tell you that. So the orange one uses Madeira poly neon 40 weight. This is a metallic gold thread. I think this one was YLI, or it might have been Madeira. This one I used a 60 weight thread, and it doesn't look very good close up. I don't think we can get close enough to see it, but it just didn't stitch well, and I think it's a tension problem because I sewed all of these in the same hoop, and I did not adjust my thread tension for any of these designs. I just used the same one. This purple one, I'm not sure what weight thread that is, but I think it's heavier than a 40 weight. I thought I was getting a cotton off my shelf, but this is not a cotton. I'm really not sure what it is, but it's thicker, and it feels thick, and it doesn't look as clean. It doesn't have the nice detail that these two do. So you're going to have to test your threads. Now this one was sewn in another type of metallic. It's called Soft Light Metallic, and it's not as sparkly. Here we have another metallic down here, and this is a heavier one. This is this thread, which is Madeira Super Twist, and I like it. It's really, really sparkly, comes in really pretty colors, and it is heavier. But these designs, both of these two here, use heavier thread. These are the mock crochet snowflakes, and they're designed to work with heavier thread. In fact, I've done 2 40 weights through the needle, and they look really, really good. Here's another one that uses soft light metallic. And you can see that it's sparkly, but it's not as shiny as the metallic up here. Now, a lot of times we just do lace in all white. And here are the pieces that I use to make the Tealight Angel. And it just interlocks together, and it has some stitching problems. Some over here, a little bit here, and these are all thread tension problems. So it's not a design problem, it is a machine problem. And we sometimes have that. This is a bow, and it's a 2-piece design. And I have it glued onto a clip. So I've just used I didn't use a hot glue on this, I used a fabric glue. These 2 pieces end up looping around, and they just end up stacked. I don't know if you can really see that there. I used a multicolor thread on this. So I used this variegated thread to get this interesting mottled look. Now I want to show you one of these little small angels. I call these the pocket angels. These are my best-selling lace designs. And what people do with these, I've gotten some really heartwarming stories about these. They'll email me and say, oh, I just make up a batch and I carry them around in a baggie in my purse and I give them to someone who's sick or who's undergoing cancer treatments or maybe having an MRI because there's no metal in here. You can have your own angel with you in the MRI machine, or someone who's just down. And these stitch up pretty fast, and I want you to notice that they're pretty open. I use these as ornaments on my tree, and I also like the snowflakes as ornaments on my tree. Now when I'm stitching the multicolor designs, or when I'm stitching a lace design that has a color in the top, I like to match the bobbin if I know that I want it to be double-sided. This is easier to do on a single needle home machine because it's easier to swap the bobbin in and out, and it's easier to stop the machine and pick up the thread color. When I'm sewing on my multi-needle, I'm just going to sew the whole thing with a white bobbin. So what thread should you use? Well, normally most designs, unless they say something otherwise, are going to call for 40 weight thread. And you can match the bobbin or not. It's really your choice. If you do match the bobbin, make sure you're using a bobbin weight thread. You don't want to add any extra thickness to your design. So you can get colored bobbins in little packages like this, and these are class 15, so they work with my brother machine. They won't work with my multi-needle. When you're buying bobbins like this, getting a set of multiple colors, make sure the size is correct for your machine. This is the correct diameter for a size L machine, but it's not the right height. These are higher, and they will not work with the machine that works with a size L bobbin. As for thread, you're going to want to check your thread. So I said 40 weight, and I've talked about how I use 60 weight on some, and 40 weight on others, and 30 weight, and 50 weight. You can try different things. For example, this design, you can see I still have it hooped, and I see that it's really washing out in the video. There we go. There we can see it. I've stitched it with this light blue thread, and I used a white bobbin. I used white because this is so light blue that I didn't have a bobbin that looked good with it. This is cotton thread, and this is a 50 weight, so it's going to be a little bit thinner. Now remember, with thread, the higher the number, the lighter the thread. The lower the number, the heavier the thread. So that generally translates to thickness. Not always, but usually does. So 50 weight cotton is going to be generally thinner than a standard 40 weight embroidery thread. So let's talk about needles. What should you use for needles? The golden rule for needles is you want to use the thinnest, sharpest needle that can carry the thread through the fabric without damaging the needle, the thread, or the fabric. That way you're going to get the most accurate needle stitch. Now, what size is that for these? Well, it depends on your thread, right? We don't have to worry about our fabric because it's just stabilizer. Should we use a sharp? Should we use a ballpoint? Mostly I use Schmetz embroidery needles, and they're sort of a in-between needle. They're kind of a rounded sharp. So that's what I use on my home machine. On my commercial machine, I do have definite sharps, definite ballpoints, because it has a round shank. It doesn't have the flat shank like our home machines do. So what about the design? You've seen some designs. How do you pick a design off a website? Well, for one, I want to see it stitched out. I don't want to see a screenshot of a lace design. Well, actually, I don't want to see a screenshot of any design. I want to know that somebody actually sewed the design before they put it up there for sale. And you'll see that in embroiderydesigns.com, the lace designs do look sewn out because they are sewn out. Now, once you download that design, then what? Well, a lot of us just put it on our stick and take it to our machine. But what I like to do is go to my embroidery software, load it up in there, and check it out. So we're going to switch to embroidery software and check that out next. Then we'll sew.
This is Hatch Embroidery Software, and it's the new version 3 released just at the end of last month. Now, if you use some other software, don't worry. You can probably do the same things in it that I do here. And if you have the Bernina software or the Janome MBX software, this is probably going to look very familiar to you. And it just happens to be what I use. I like to look at designs in my embroidery software before stitching. Now really, with most embroidery machines today, you can simply download your format, unzip it, and transfer it to your machine. You don't have to have embroidery software. And many machines use a stick, so you really don't need anything else, unless you want to reformat a design for your machine for some reason. Now, I like to look at designs because, well, for one, I'm nosy, and I want to see what the digitizer did. And maybe I can learn some new trick, because looking at other people's designs is the best way to learn how to digitize. And while we can see and do a lot of things on the more advanced embroidery machines, such as resize and combine and rotate and all that, I am just more comfortable on a computer. Now, another reason is I want to know certain things about the design before I take time to stitch it. Looking at it will give me some clues as to what I might need to do to get it to stitch out better, or maybe just skip it altogether. So this is part of the bow design, and I've got a 5x7 130 by 180 millimeter hoop showing here so you can see how large it is. And it just fits this hoop. In fact, it's 179 millimeters tall, and I resized it to 178 millimeters because sometimes my machine will say this is too large for my hoop, and I don't want to go to a larger hoop. Now I have a lot of free space around this, and the other part of the bow looks like this. And it's going to require the same size hoop. In fact, if I turn on a 100 hoop, you can see that it's too big for that. So why don't I just combine them into one hoop? And that's what I did here. And here you can see we have one chunk of stitches for this part of the bow and another chunk of stitches for the other part of the bow. And this little icon indicates that these are just stitches only. So when I resize this from 179 millimeters down to 178 millimeters, it didn't change the design pattern in any way. It just microscopically, practically, shrunk the stitches a little shorter and a little closer together. 1 millimeter is insignificant on a design of this size. Now in some programs, and Hatch happens to be one, it wants to open machine files, which are just stitches, and try to convert them into objects. We don't want to do that because we have specialty stitches going on in here, and Hatch won't know what kind of object that is, and so it'll put some kind of default thing on there, and it might not be right. Now, as long as we don't do anything to resize the design or do anything that would cause it to recalculate, we're fine. But I resized this, and even 1 millimeter resizing will change those stitches. So if you have software that does that, tries to convert it into objects, and I don't know what all software does that, you'll know, then you need to turn off that feature. And I just like to open machine files as stitches only. And we can see we just have stitches only there. So I have this combined, and now all I need to do is export it for my machine. Now, I could have moved these closer together like that. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to move them down in the corner or anything. In fact, I would just do that at my machine. So for example, at your machine you might think of, well, why don't I just do something like that so I have this extra stabilizer over here that I'm not using. The reason I'm not doing that is because the best and most uniform stabilization is in the center. And so I like to keep things kind of centered. They're overlapping. So now this is ready to export. If I want to make sure it's centered, I'll click the Center All button. Now another design I stitched was this little butterfly. Here you can see it in a 4x4 hoop, the 100mm hoop. And I'm going to zoom in on this. And you can see that it's pretty small. It's almost a quarter of the size of my hoop, so 52.4 by 44.8. I'll zoom back out to 100%. Now if we look over here on the objects docker, remember these are not objects, these are globs of stitches. It has separate globs. And that's because for some reason this little design has trims in it. It shouldn't have trims in it, but it does. Can we fix that? Not easily. I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to let the machine handle it. My machine, which is a Brother Dream machine that I'm going to sew this on, will see these and it'll trim, even though they're very short. If your machine doesn't trim on shorter trims, or it only trims at the end of a color change, you could have floating stitches that get partially sewn in that you'll have to dig out. So this is something I'm going to look for when I'm checking my designs before I sew them. Now because this design is small, and this is the smallest hoop I have that it'll fit in, I want to take advantage of this extra space. So I've combined 4 of them in one hoop. And they just squish in there pretty close, but they do fit. And I've given each one of them a different color. And that's so that I can stop the machine and put a different thread color in there if I want to, and I'll probably want to change the bobbin if I'm using colored thread on the top for my lace. Now here's another butterfly design, and you can see that it doesn't quite fit my 100mm hoop. I am not going to try to shrink this. Lace is very specially digitized so that all the stitches integrate and connect, because when we stitch lace, once we wash out that stabilizer, we don't have any fabric to secure the design. It's just going to be whatever the stitches are doing to hold it together. So I'll need to go up to the 5x7 hoop, the 130 by 180 hoop, and I'm going to select these 2 pieces. This one also has a trim in it. I'll group that, and then I'm going to right click and drag one of them down, and I'll just move this one up and just kind of arrange them like that. And I can make this one a different color. It doesn't matter what color I make it. I'll center all of those. And I'm ready to export this from my machine. Here's another little design for the flowers. You saw this as a red, white, and blue flower. I did this in blue, this in white, and this in red. And I just stacked them all together. Now, are they intended to do that? Who knows? I have 3 flowers that could be stacked or used individually. So I can do anything with those. Now here are 2 more designs. This one and this one I digitized. And if you look at the sequence docker, this is what objects look like in Hatch. And so I can select different parts and I can actually do something with them. We're not going to do anything with them here. But what I want to point out to you here is the difference in 2 styles of digitizing lace. The candy cane has a grid of stitches. In fact, we can see that. Select these and I'll hide everything else. And you can see we have a grid of stitches. This is essentially replacing our fabric. So it's building a network of stitches so that when we place other stitches on top, we're not so worried about integrating all those stitches so that the design holds together. Now, I call this instant lace. It's not that it's truly instant. I mean, it's not a one-click design by any means, but it's a lot faster than doing lace like this. On this type of design, I have to carefully path everything, make sure everything connects with each other, it overlaps, it interlocks, and this takes quite a bit of work. This to me is more like traditional lace, even though this is pretty dense. This little angel is pretty small. She's about, I don't know, maybe 3 inches tall at the most. This is almost 4 inches. So these are the 2 types of lace as I see them. We see a lot more lace like this. Let's turn on all the stitches again. You can see how those other stitches just lay over the top, and they're supported by this network of other stitches. If you're just learning to make lace, this is a good starter design. This one will take longer, but you know what? When I do designs like this, it's like meditation, especially when they're one color, because then I'm just kind of thinking of doing a maze and connecting everything without too much backtracking, but enough backtracking to build up support to hold those stitches. Now what about resizing? Even when you have an object design like this, I wouldn't resize too much because you can't make it too much smaller. These stitches are pretty small. And we'll zoom in, turn on the measuring tool. We can see that those stitches are 1.8 millimeters. So I could make it a tiny bit smaller, but I really don't like my stitches much shorter than 1.5 millimeters. Stitches are going to shrink in, and this is going to have a lot of travel stitches underneath and structural stitches. And if you get them too short, those stitches are more likely to become exposed. Now these are objects, so when you resize, Hatch will control the object properties for you. On a machine file, which is just stitches only, these stitches are going to either scrunch together if you make it smaller or spread out if you make it larger. And if I were going to resize that, I would take all of these and I would group them together. The maximum recommended amount for resizing a stitch file design is only plus or minus 10%, and I wouldn't go that much on a lace design. I definitely wouldn't go that far down. Lace designs tend to be more dense, and they tend to have a lot of short stitches. It really depends on the design, and you must test. So I'll change this to 105. Even when you haven't made any changes to a design, you want to be sure and test it. Now another quick thing I'll do, and I'll just do this really fast, is I like to go to the stitch player and watch it sew. And we'll just speed that up. I don't generally watch it sew this fast, but I don't want to take the time in the class to do this. You'll probably have software that can do this. I don't know of any machine that will do this, but you can do this in software and you can watch how it sews and you can see any places where it doesn't look like it has enough support or it's doing something strange, and then you can decide, can I fix this? Can I live with this? Or do I just want to skip it? Now you have seen this design sewn out, and even though he had those little trims in it, he still sews just fine. The problem with lace designs is because we see through to the back, we're going to have thread tails that we have to deal with. So I like to look at it in software to see what hoops do I need to use. Can I make better use of my hoops by combining designs? I can't always tell that at the machine. I'm not as machine savvy as I am in the software. So the software is just easier to me. And once I have it all set up, I just export it, put it on my stick, send it to my machine. You'll want to test the lace to see how it performs on your machine with your needle, threads, and stabilizer choices.
Now that we've learned a little bit about our design, I have it loaded on my stick, it's in my machine, it's ready to go. I have my thread loaded, I'm ready to hoop my stabilizer. So the stabilizer I like to use is this water-soluble fiber. And I like to use 2 layers. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have one layer here and another layer here. And I still have my roll attached. And what's going on here is I have the roll going this way and folding back on itself this way so that the edge is right here. And what that does is it gives me better usage of my stabilizer. Now I know some of you guys like to patch your stabilizer. I do not like to patch my stabilizer. I want a whole piece in there, and I want to make sure that it's very sturdy and very stable. Can you use 1 layer? Yes, you can. I will use 1 layer on a smaller design in a small hoop, but I most often use 2 layers. And the reason is I want my design to hold up. Now you don't want to use a film, and the films are generally known as Solvay or something like that. We have Badge Master and others that are heavier. But even with those, when the needle goes in, it's actually puncturing a hole in there. And if you get enough holes in there, then it's going to separate and it can stretch and you are losing your stabilization. So this is much better. This is like sewing on fabric. Now, the one that I get from Embroidery Designs is this one. It's called Water Dissolvable, and it'll be in your list down below. And what I like to do is take that label and stick it inside so that I know what this is. Now, this stabilizer looks very much like this one. This one is polymesh, or also known as no-show mesh. We do not want to use this because this is a cutaway. And if you embroider on this, then your lace is in there permanently. It's not going to come out. Now, if you don't put the labels in there, how will you know? Well, here's my little trick. I just lift up the little corner and I chew on it a little bit. Doesn't taste like hot fudge, but it doesn't have much of a taste at all. Don't worry about it. If it dissolves, you know it's the right one. Now, another thing to notice is that this stabilizer is the right size for my 5x7 or my 130 by 180 hoop. I use this hoop a lot, so I like to get rolls that are sized for my hoop. Now, if you have a larger hoop, here's my 200 by 200 hoop. This stabilizer is not wide enough. It looks like it would be, but it's really not. I guess you're seeing the back side. So there's the front. It's just not wide enough. And for that, I get my wash away on a bolt like this. And this is Fab Solvi by Solvi. They also have this in Embroidery Designs, so you can get that. If you have a large hoop, then you can use this. Now, I think in the other video where we were in the software, I don't gang up my designs in a large hoop. So if I were sewing those little butterflies, I would not fill up that big hoop I just showed you to sew all of this. I'll fill up a small hoop, but not one of those big ones. It's just not stable enough. So if you do a lot of lace, this is the way to get it, because this is more economical in the long run. So I have my small hoop already set up. I'll get this one out of the way. And with this one, I've taken the same roll and cut off a piece, and now my fold is at the bottom. I don't like to have the roll hanging off the top. It's just too cumbersome. When it's hanging off the side of my machine, at least on my brother, I can have it supported out here, and it's not flopping all around. Now with this piece, I can actually get two hoopings. So if I hoop near the edge, I can sew in this hooping, and then without cutting this out, or maybe just cutting it right next to the design, depending on where it is, I'll move my hoop over and get the other side. So I'm maximizing the use of my stabilizer. Now, another thing is, I save these scraps. And the other day I had to stiffen up a design, so I just mixed up some of this with some hot water, and then I dipped my lace again, laid it out to dry, and now it's all stiff again. So I've got some of my pins in, my T-pins, and these are just T-pins from my macrame days. If any of you did macrame back in the 70s, or as it's come around again the second time, I like to use these T-pins because they're heavier and they're thicker. And the purpose is to keep the fabric, the stabilizer, from slipping through the hoop. So I'm just going to slide one in here, and I do it after it's hooped. So you can just see there I've slid it in. You don't need too many on here. Now what if you don't have T-pins? You don't have to go out and buy them. Just regular old straight pins will work. So now I'm ready to sew. I'm going to sew one of the butterflies, and I'm going to use the variegated pink. I already have it loaded in my machine, and I need to put in a matching bobbin. So I've chosen a pink bobbin. This is the right size for my brother. It's a class 15 bobbin. You can wind your own. I like pre-wounds. Pre-wounds are just more evenly wound than I can wind, and they're ready to go. They also have more thread on them. If you're winding your own bobbin, you can do that. I mean, I have a little case down here that has all my 60 weight thread in it. So I just keep that, my 60 weight thread in there. They're from 3 or 4 different sources. 60 weight thread is available from Madeira and some other sources. They're not going to be a full line of colors. So I just pick colors where I can find them. And I'll just wind my bobbin with that. So I'm going to switch over to the machine and we'll get sewing. So I'm going to take out the old bobbin. Can you see how this bobbin doesn't have very much thread on it? You do not want to run out of a bobbin when you're embroidering, especially lace, because it's going to be another thread tail that you have to deal with. And once you remove the stabilizer, you're going to see all those thread tails. So this is the same weight bobbin thread that I normally use, so I shouldn't have to make any adjustments. I'll insert my hoop. And now what I want to do is travel to the first stitch in the design. You'll need to figure out how to do that on your machine. I can tell you it's much easier on this machine than on my 15 needle Baradin. And then I'm just going to turn the hand wheel to bring up the bobbin thread. And here's my bobbin tail. And I'll just hold those. And make sure you hold it away from the presser foot. I'll drop the presser foot and press the go button. And I'm only going to sew a few stitches. And then I'll trim those thread tails. And then we'll just let her rip. Okay, so our design is finished sewing, and if we look at the back, we can see that it looks pretty good. So now all I have to do is cut it out and finish it. And take my pins out. Now could I have moved it over to the corner? Oh yeah, I could have, but I never remember to do that because I'm in the habit of using proper techniques. You're just going to cut away the excess stabilizer. It doesn't have to be really, really close. And I definitely could have used just one layer for this. And now I have some hot water here. So I'm just going to take my little lace piece, hold it with the tongs, because I don't have asbestos fingers like some of you may do. And I'm just going to do a couple little quick dips like that. And then I'm going to lay it on a towel, fold it over, and roll it. You do not want to wring your lace. You can just squeeze out the excess with a towel, and then I put it on a cookie drying or cookie cooling rack, and then I'll put a little tile on top of it. So I just have a little trivet kind of tile, and I'll just lay that on top, and it'll dry flat that way. Now, you can't do all designs that way. Some have to be shaped. So for example, my Snowflake Designs, I have this board, and these are just templates of all the little snowflake designs. And what I did here is, I don't know, have you ever crocheted snowflakes? You have to block them afterwards. And so we'll do that with starch or hot sugar water, and then we need to pin them out. So for my snowflakes, I'll just find the appropriate one, and I'll just pin it out over that shape, and then I know that it's going to be shaped properly. And once it dries, then it retains its shape. Now this angel, how can you see her? So there you go. So she's been shaped over a cone, a styrofoam cone, and she interlocks on the back, so you can take her apart and store her flat, or you can ship her. That's what I like about a lot of the lace designs, is you can store them flat or you can ship them. See how there we go, there she is. And this way They'll stay flat, they stay shippable, they're lightweight, they're easy to sew. And you know what? If you mess one up, you haven't messed up any fabric. All you've messed up is some stabilizer. So let's talk about some gotchas. Now, assuming that you have a good design and that you've hooped and stabilized properly, the number one problem you're going to have is a machine problem. And the number one problem I see is tension problems. So let's get Mr. Cameraman to zoom in again. So this is the front of this design. Looks really good. Here is the back. Can you see all the blobby stuff? Maybe if I tilt it, can you see it? See how it's textured? I've ended up with more top thread on the back than I have on the front. And it's because I'm having a tension problem. This is not the thread in this case. This is the tension problem at the machine. So another problem, can you see all these little threads that are wiggling around in this area? That's another tension problem. So you want to pay attention to this. You need to have really optimal tensions. You also have some problems up here. See that little thread nest there? And over here on this side, we have a lot of nesting going. Those should be clean little squares, and we see knots and loops of thread. So this is probably the number one problem I see with lace. Now another problem you can have is if the tensions aren't working properly. So if your tensions are too tight, then the stitches are not going to interlock and they can have gaps. And if they gap, then your lace is going to fall apart. One of the first embroidery machines I had, it did not tension well. And it was just a problem with that model of machine. And stitches work well horizontally, but not vertically. So things would pull too tight and it would gap. So if you're having that kind of problem, you can stitch it on organza. So this is the same angel design. She's been digitized differently. And I've just sewn her on organza. And if you use a sparkly kind, it can look really, really pretty. So let's talk about some other finishing touches you can do. The angel, I have actually done a little inking. I've taken some dilute ink, tinted it blue, and done her skirt. So she has just a pale shade of blue, and then I've added a little bow and some little tiny straw flowers. And I don't know if you can see the sparkles on her halo and on her wings, but you can get this glitter glue. And I like the glitter glue. I've also done it on the snowflake. And I'll just take some glitter glue and I smear some on my finger, and then I just rub it over the lace. And that gives it a really pretty effect. And the two colors that I like the best are the opalescent and the gold. So you might try those. You can find them at the hobby store. Probably Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something like that. So once your lace is dry, what do you do with it? Well, it's ready to do whatever you want with it. I showed you a couple ideas with the glitter glue and the ink, but this one is now ready to be assembled. And apparently just kind of fold around and her wings fold back like this. I'm not exactly sure how she goes because I didn't digitize this one, but we will have instructions for you on how to do that. Now one more sample I didn't show you earlier is the sweater. And here we've used a heavy kind of cotton thread to make the lace, and it's got little buttons and sequins embellished along here, and I don't know if they sparkle in the light a little bit, but we have them on the cuffs and around the neck. So these are things that you can do with your lace. They can be ornaments, they can be freestanding objects. I mean, I've seen pumpkins and haunted houses and all sorts of elaborate things. So once you have the basic techniques down, you're good to go. Just make anything you want. So check down below and see what we have on special.
Wow, weren't those some great tips? We hope you enjoyed today's demonstration, and a special shout out to our great host, Lindee G. The floor is now open to chat in your questions, and Lindee G will answer them. If you'd like to see more tutorials and inspiration, check out our YouTube channel, Embroidery Designs, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. If you saw designs or supplies in today's video you want to try, remember to use the event code Lindee to get free shipping on stabilizers and Madeira thread. Plus, below the video, you'll find exclusive discounted FSL packs. Thank you for visiting embroiderydesigns.com, your one-stop shop for all things embroidery. Until the next time, stay inspired and get crafting!